Hello and welcome back to Dragon Quest World Tutorials. I am KoiTGZ, and in this video, I want to go over the top 10 weapons of 2024 that I do have in my inventory. So, like I mentioned in the other top 10 video, I got half of the weapons that were released this year, and many of them are very good weapons, which really makes making this list difficult. But I believe that the weapon that I have as my number one is quite good for going forward in the future. So, since I did get 12 weapons this year, the two that didn't make the top 10 are the Demon Axe and Little Devil Satia's Rod, respectively, at 11th and 12th place. Both weapons have very good abilities with dealing with specific types of enemies, but neither of them has anything to combat against metal type enemies, so that's the reason why I don't have them higher up on the list. So first I want to go over my number 10. At number 10 here I have the Zombie Killer. So with the Zombie Killer, this weapon was featured in the Dragon Quest III Rewalk event during the early summer and was one of the two weapons featured in the Veteran Warrior banner. So this weapon is good for for its main ability, so Unyielding Blade. So Unyielding Blade did 900% weapon damage to one enemy while lowering its attack power, and when the wielder takes damage due to a class trait, they can counterattack with a damage equivalent to 20 times. So pretty much this is going to be mainly for a God Hand or a Guardian. Then since the damage is straight weapon damage, it can be used on just about any enemy, and being able to lower the enemy attack power is a plus, especially if the enemy uses a lot of physical attacks. So that's going to be that for that particular ability. Then it's also going to have Fighting Spirit Infusion, which actually was pretty good. Pretty much it gives all allies strength of protection, in which they recover 50% of their HP after taking damage from an enemy that lowers their HP below 30%, though this can only be used once during battle. Then besides that, this ability or this particular weapon does not have any abilities that can actually do damage to metal type enemies. Then for my number 9, I'm going to actually have the Blade of Goddess Celsia. So Blade of Goddess Celsia, this was the final weapon of the 5th anniversary event, and this is a weapon that you would want to have more than one of in your inventory. It really did help out in terms of videos that I did make, especially in regards to Dark Lord Las Versa. So pretty much the reasons why you want to have this particular weapon is a couple of abilities. You have Tobe Ruda, which pretty much is a spell that allows you to negate the effects of traps and magical binds and domain skills. So that's actually quite good. Then it also has the ability called Second Coming Slash. So that actually does damage to the enemy while also resurrecting an ally for 50% of their HP. So that's quite good too. Then it's going to have the ability Guiding Holy Slash, which does 11,000% weapon damage to one enemy, and then also recovers a certain amount of HP to one ally. Though if the wielder gets a critical hit, it will be a super critical hit and will recover a certain amount of HP to all allies. Then it's also going to have an energy flow together. So with this, at the start of the battle, all allies will have their max HP and max MP limit increased by 20% for 4 turns. So the reason why this weapon is not higher on my list is that it has no abilities that deal damage to all enemies, and also not to metal enemies as well. So this weapon is best to use in a boss battle, especially if you're fighting a single enemy. And at number 8 here, I'm going to have the Angel Guillotine. So the Angel Guillotine, this weapon was the second weapon of 2024 and can be very useful in both field battles and boss battles. So the main reason why I have this on the list is you're going to actually have an ability called Death Sanction. So this is going to do 350% normal weapon damage to all enemies, but it also has a chance to inflict instant death. So This ability made this weapon quite effective in battles, especially field battles for Journeys of Awakening, where enemies were weak to Dorma attribute, and having this on a character like a High Priest or Archmage made them an integral part of the team, as while they didn't do very good damage in terms of inflicting on the enemy. They also had a very good chance of getting an instant death. So that actually made this weapon pretty good even in that situation. Then it also had the ability called Eternal Judgment. So with that, that did 900% weapon damage with a chance of getting a direct hit on the enemy. So that also had a rare chance to lower weapon and physical technique resistance. So additionally, it also had a fate level that if it was increased to maximum, you would actually give the enemy a negative limit break. And I believe this was the first weapon to actually do that to an enemy. So that's actually quite good. But similar to the Blade of God Celsia, the weapon is lower on the list since it doesn't have any ability to combat against metal type enemies. Then number 7 on my list is going to be the Demonic Illusion Spear. So this weapon was the final weapon of 2024, and having tested the weapon out in a Mega Monster battle, I saw the potential that this weapon could have. So pretty much what makes this weapon special are two things. One is going to be its first sudden activation ability, which is going to be called Double Edged Demon Spear Technique. So when the wielder activates a counterattack or a reflect, they will consume 2% of their HP, and the power of their counterattack and reflect will be magnified by the amount of HP consumed. So I actually went over that in the weapon breakdown of this particular weapon. Then here, Soul Imitation, its main ability, which is going to do to 750% boggy weapon damage to one enemy, and also has a chance of getting direct hits. And it also gives the wielder the counter attack buff. So with counter attack buff on, the wielder will counter attack for 10 times the damage received. Again, that's going to be boosted by the sudden activation ability. So with the sudden activation ability and the effective soul imitation, when used with Guardian's Stand Firm ability, this can do some serious damage to an enemy that does major damage to all characters. So I'm very excited to test this weapon out on the final boss of a super high difficulty quest. Again, this weapon is not higher on the list because it does not have an ability to combat against metal type enemies. And at number 6 on my list is going to be the Great Sword of Darkness Repelling Light. So this was the first one that appeared, or this weapon was the first one that appeared in Dragon Quest III Rewalk event, and was or has been a weapon that has shaped my leveling team going forward. So one of the abilities that this has is going to be Giga Aerial Slash, which in this case does 370% Dane or Boggy damage to all enemies, plus 48 damage to metal type enemies. So there goes your metal damage there. Then also is going to have Giga Blade. So this is actually quite good. This does direct hit damage for 730% Dane weapon damage, with a rare chance of increasing the wielder's critical hit rate. So here every time you do it, it does direct hit damage. So that's actually quite good in doing in a boss battle that's going to be weak against the Dane attribute. Then something that has also set this weapon apart is that it's the first to feature a challenge. So in this case, it's going to be the Hero's Challenge. So during the battle, if the wielder performs 3 critical hits, Hero's Resolve and the beginning of Legend will be reactivated. So that's going to be the sudden activation abilities of this weapon. So the weapon is a permanent fixture on my leveling team, since it is quite effective when fighting groups of enemies and single enemies. So also something to mention, while druids are not proficient with great swords, they are very effective using the weapon due to their ability to deal 1 to 4 extra damage on enemies, which makes it which can make it possible to take out field enemies with a single blow. So that's actually one reason why this particular weapon is actually quite good. Then at number 5 here, I'm going to have the Flail of Destruction. So this weapon was the New Year weapon of 2024 and was also the weapon that was introduced along with the Dragon special class. So this also was the first EX weapon and the first weapon to have 2 attributes for 1 skill. So that was mainly due to the sudden activation ability called Sudden Storm Force. So with Storm Force at the start of the battle, you receive buff of Storm Force with the wielder gains the forces of Io and Bagi, which gives resistances to both attributes and also increases the effectiveness of attacks utilizing those attributes. Then besides that, you've seen me use this particular weapon in battle. So you've seen me use Impulse of Destruction, which does 400% physical technique damage to all enemies and does an additional 3 attacks for 160% damage each to random enemies. So that actually worked out well and also has rare chances of getting direct hits. Then you also saw Crushing Destruction, which is actually very effective in the Hellcaster Journey of Awakening. So this does 630% physical technique damage to all enemies, 66 damage to metal enemies, and inflicts fighting spirit loss rank 1. For every enemy defeated with this skill, the wielder will recover 10 HP and MP. So while I do not use this weapon on my standard leveling team, it is very effective and useful in field battles for the most recent Hellcaster Journey of Awakening, and is also very effective in boss battles as well. And at number 4 here, I'm going to have Lamia's Whip. So this weapon was also featured in the Dragon Quest III Rewalk event, and while it doesn't have an ability to combat against metal type enemies, it can do some pretty good damage to the enemy and also provide very good support to a party member. So with one thing it does have, it has a sudden POD move, so pretty much at the start of battle, all allies get their agility increased by 1 rank. So this lasts 2 turns, but this is quite good because characters can take the initiative in terms of defeating the enemy as fast as possible. Then it's also going to have Dazzling Wings, which at the start of the battle, all enemies have a chance to be inflicted with Weaken. So that's going to lessen their resistances to physical attacks. Then besides that, its main ability here is going to be called Flame of the Phoenix. So Flame of the Phoenix, this does 440% Eel or Mara's physical technique damage to all enemies and gives the ally that takes the next action a limit break buff, greatly increases their skill damage and greatly raises their critical hit rate or spell crit rate. So that's actually quite good, and it's actually a very good buffer for any team. So while I do not use this weapon with my standard leveling team like the Flail of Destruction, this is very good for the Hellcaster Journey of Awakening and also good for buffing party members in boss battles. So pretty much Mega Monsters and Hokuda. And at number 3 here, I'm going to have the Fallen Angel's Coffin. So pretty much like Lamia's Whip, this weapon does not have any abilities that can combat a metal type enemy, but the debuffs that this weapon can do toward an enemy make it very effective. So the main ability that we're going to have here is going to be called Eternal Salvation. So pretty much with the chance of getting a direct hit, this does 999% physical technique damage to one enemy with the chance of lowering their resistance to weapon and physical technique damage by 1 rank. Also, the later the wielder takes this action compared to other party members, the more their critical hit rate increases. Then something else about this particular weapon is not necessarily going to be from its sudden activation abilities, but going to be from challenges. So this is actually going to have not just 1 but 3 challenges. So in my weapon breakdown of this particular weapon, I actually went over those 3. So we're going to have Unchained, which when the wielder gets a critical hit in a battle, they will consume 7 MP and their attack power increases by 1 rank. Then for unreasonable. The other challenge is, in this case, when the wielder gets a direct hit in battle, they will consume 4% of their max MP and gain a limit break. So, which also giving a random enemy a negative limit break. So that's going to be very effective in a boss battle. Then we're also going to have the challenge, which is unlucky. So when the wielder gets a direct hit and critical hit at the same time, they will consume 5 MP and will either lower the resistance of spell, breath, or physical attacks. So in this case, weapon and physical technique of a random enemy that for last 2 turns. So again, while I don't have this weapon on my leveling team, this weapon has proven to be very effective in boss battles, especially when I'm able to debuff the enemy's resistance to physical attacks and get a negative debuff. So yeah, so this is my number 3. And at number 2, I'm going to have the Claw of the Dragon Queen. So this weapon was featured after the 4.5-year anniversary and was a unique weapon at the time since it featured the ability to blow away enemies. So pretty much the 2 abilities that it had were both breath abilities that had the chance to blow enemies away, but not only that, also did damage to metal type enemies. So we had Queen's Breath Darkness and Queen's Breath Heat. So Queen's Breath Darkness did actually Dorma damage, while the Heat did Gita damage, but both did breath damage that had a chance to blow away enemies as well. If the wielder is a dragon, they actually have a rare chance to blow an enemy away. But each of the abilities does 70 damage to metal type enemies, which actually is quite good. And then again, blowing away an enemy is actually very advantageous in a battle, as it is possible to blow away an enemy that can be quite troublesome. Then in some cases, you're able to blow away all the enemies that you may encounter in a field battle, but that is very rare, and I've only seen that happen twice since acquiring this weapon. But also, blowing away an enemy works in Hokuras as well, so it is possible to clear a Hokura with just one attack. Then for my number 1 weapon is going to be right over here. This is going to be the Metal King Greatsword. So this weapon was the first weapon of the 5th anniversary event and is my favorite weapon of 2024. So after acquiring the weapon, it became a game changer for my encounters with specific Hokura and also the field battles. So one of the important features of this weapon is King Time, a sudden activation ability that we have seen in the past on the Metal King Sword, but after 2 years, the Metal King Sword has lost its effectiveness in battle. So the Metal King Greatsword is the successor of the Metal King Sword by not only having King Time, but also being relevant to all various battles that you have in the game currently. So with King Time, if you remember, at the start of the battle, your allies will have a rare chance to take their actions before all the enemies, but if a metal enemy is present, you have a 100% chance of taking action before the enemies, including the metal type enemies. So this is actually very good for leveling your characters. Then the other sudden activation ability that you're going to have is going to be Black Hole. So Black Hole, it costs 2% of your max MP, and at the start of your turn, a Black Hole domain will activate. While the Black Hole is active, enemies that are reduced to less than 15% of their HP by attacks from allies will be destroyed, with the exception of some enemies. And that lasts 99 turns. So this is actually quite good, especially in the current Hellcaster Journey of Awakening, where you do have some very strong enemies with high HP. So if you're actually able to bring them down to 15%, that actually does help out quite a bit. And then also we're going to have a challenge skill as well for this particular weapon, which is going to be the Vow of Vengeance. So during battle, if the wielder performs 3 critical hits, the Black Hole domain will activate, and the wielder will get a executable, so going to get increase to their attack power by 2 ranks, so that's quite good. Then the main ability that's going to be used here is going to be Grand Nebula. So with Grand Nebula, it does 530% Shadow or Dorma weapon damage to all enemies, plus 80 damage to metal type enemies. So with the effect of Black Hole, this cannot be guarded nor evaded, so this is actually quite a good weapon. So needless to say, this weapon is definitely on my leveling team, and I use it quite a bit in Hogaras and Metal Mega Monsters as well. So like the weapon that it succeeds, it is my pick for the best weapon of the year. So that is going to be my list for the top 10 weapons of 2024 that I do have in my inventory. So tell me at the bottom of your, or in the comments below, tell me your top 10 list. If you can't think of top 10, top 5 is also fine too. But yeah, definitely what's coming next, I will be covering the events for New Year's 2025, so please stay tuned for that. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and end this video here, so thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.